Let's break it down. When the UK Prime Minister is in Beijing trying to unlock trade and investment, and the US President turns around and says, "That's very dangerous," it tells you something important. This isn't just about economics. It's about who sets the rules for allies and how much freedom they really have when China is involved. Because for London, China is a market you can't pretend doesn't exist. For Washington, China is the strategic competitor you're supposed to contain. And for Beijing, every high-level visit is a signal. We're not isolated. We can still do deals. Now, after that context, I'm Imran, a Middle East-based analyst. And today we're going to unpack what just happened, why everyone is talking past each other, and what to watch next. Here's the setup. On this trip, Prime Minister Keir Starmer met China's leader in Beijing and pitched a reset focused on practical economic wins, lower barriers, smoother travel, and more predictable access for business. Reporting around the visit says the UK pushed for improved market access and tariff relief. And the trip also coincided with major corporate signaling, including AstraZeneca announcing a very large multi-year investment plan in China. Then came the headline moment. President Donald Trump publicly warned that it's very dangerous for the UK to get into business with China. Starmer's response was essentially, "We can't ignore China and engagement is in the national interest," while also stressing the UK remains a close US ally. And Beijing's response was classic diplomacy. China's foreign ministry framed it as win-win cooperation, basically saying China is open to working with any country on mutual benefit. So why does this matter? Because each side is optimizing for a different reality. For the UK, the incentive is growth and leverage. The British economy needs investment, exports, and headline wins that show momentum. And strategically, London also wants options. If the US is more unpredictable, it's rational for allies to diversify relationships, even if they still anchor to Washington on security. For China, the incentive is to reopen channels with major Western economies and reduce the sense of a united front against it. Even limited deals matter if they signal normalization. Visa changes, tariff adjustments, and high-profile corporate investment all send a message that China can still attract capital and partnerships. For Trump's White House, the incentive is deterrence and alignment. The US doesn't just compete with China directly. It tries to shape the behavior of allies, so China can't use partner countries as a workaround for pressure, technology controls, and supply chain strategy. Now let's talk scenarios and risks, because this can go a few ways. Scenario 1 is managed balancing, the UK. Keep selective engagement with China on trade and investment while tightening national security guardrails at home. That's the have it both ways approach, and it can work, but it requires discipline and clear red lines. Scenario 2 is escalation by pressure. Washington decides that warnings aren't enough and starts attaching consequences, formal or informal, that make UK businesses and investors nervous. Even without direct tariffs, uncertainty alone can chill deals. Scenario 3 is domestic backlash. Inside the UK, critics will argue that Beijing uses economic openings to soften scrutiny on human rights and security concerns. And China lifting restrictions on lawmakers can be read two ways, as de-escalation or as a tactical move to reduce friction while the economic agenda advances. So what should you watch next? First, implementation details. Big announcements matter less than the fine print. When do visa changes actually start? How durable are tariff adjustments? And what sectors get real market access? Second, the security boundary. Watch what the UK does on sensitive technology, research links, data, telecom, and critical infrastructure. That's where economic reset meets hard power. Third, the US follow-through. Is this just rhetoric for domestic politics, or does policy shift? And here's the twist, the US itself is still engaging China at high levels. So the question becomes whether Washington wants allies to be stricter than it is. Bottom line, this episode is less about one comment and more about a bigger pattern. In a more fragmented world, middle powers like the UK will try to trade with China, secure with the US, and keep room to maneuver. The friction isn't going away, it's the new normal. If you found this breakdown useful, hit like, subscribe, and share it. And tell me in the comments, Should allies be free to strike pragmatic deals with China, or does that weaken the collective leverage that keeps security risks under control?